so I could see faces.
Oh, that makes sense. So we've got a bunch of people. We've got Ragna from Rosebud Perfume Lab. We've got Mason from Mizu.
Oh, nice.
Michael, who's an indie perfumer from New York. Oh, Mythologist. That's a cool name. Love it. That's really cool. Carla is dialing in from London. She's a fragrance journalist for, oh, Base Notes. Cool. Base Notes in the house. Awesome. Dan, a fragrance collector from New York. We love you, fragrance collectors. Big fans of yours. Oh, and Ragna says she's in Chico. Oh, I like Chico. It's pretty up there. Olivia, who is in PR at Givaudan. Awesome. Welcome. We've got Philip Kraft, who's a chemist from Givaudan. All right, Givaudan is showing up, Olivia.
Yeah.
Your people are here. Tiana from Ataraxia. We've got Doug and Lauren from Anon Dart. That sounds interesting, from Orange County. Sid from Sid Botanica and Scent Trunk. Hi, Sid. Scent Trunk. We love you. We've got a perfumer with Scent Alchemist from Indiana and Hawaii. And Karen, who's a fragrance lover, Australian woman living in the Bay Area. Welcome to the Bay Area. We've got Leiko Lin from Boston, who's a scent enthusiast. Oh, and another Givaudan person, Joy. Lori Caruso. Any new people who are joining, please introduce yourselves in the chat window. We'd love to know who you are and what your connection to fragrance is. We've got Monica, chemist and hobby perfumer from the Bay Area. Mauricio, Herbcraft Ministry of Scent. Hey, friend. Josh from Libertine. Hey, Josh. Wonderful to see you. We've got Kelly Jones from Kingston, New York, just joined. This is so fun. All you humans out there.
It's nice to see so many faces, right?
It really is.
After all the isolation.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. We've got Olga Perfume Days from London. So, oh, this is cool. She's a perfume lover who does organizes perfume walks and talks in London.
Fun.
So it looks like just about everyone's here. So it's probably a good time to get started. Welcome everyone to Indie to Industry. I'm Antonia, and I'll be moderating this panel with Olivia Jan and Miriam Vareltzes. And we're really excited to have this conversation. We're going to be today exploring how scent development fits into brands scaling from indie to industry, and with a particular focus on how brands can work with fragrance consultants, fragrance houses, and professional perfumers in order to really be able to scale their production to the next level. So we'll be hearing a lot from Olivia and from Miriam based on their experience in their very extensive careers in fragrance development and perfumery. And before we jump in, I want to quickly do a little housekeeping. Yosh is going to be monitoring the chat window. So if you have questions, you can type them in the window. We're actually going to be doing a Q&A section at the end. So if there's a particularly relevant question, Yosh will pop in with that question and let us know that it's a good time to address it. But otherwise, we definitely save time at the end. So don't worry if we move past your question when you ask it. We'll get to it later for sure. And then lastly, we did create a resource list for everybody. So we are going to be mentioning some resources and organizations, some guidelines, and we've put those all into a list with some other resources for you. And that'll be posted in the chat window at the very end of the session. So don't worry if you missed something in your notes and didn't get it, we'll give you that. So quickly, I'm going to give a little bit about our backgrounds, and then I'll hand it over to Olivia and Miriam to tell you a little bit more about themselves. I am the co-owner of Tiger Lily Perfumery and Ministry of Scent in San Francisco. Tiger Lily opened in 2013 now, which is kind of crazy, and is really a platform for independent perfumeries. So we showcase 100% independent perfumers and small brands in our store. And I personally have a really big, quite a big passion about working with independent artists and rule breakers of all kinds. But I'm also a vintage perfume collector, so I have deep love and respect for the classical tradition of perfumery as well. Ministry of Scent, really briefly, is a fragrance company that does small-scale fragrance formulation and large-scale fragrance events and classes. And we'll also be launching a brand date coming soon. So look forward to that. And my background is actually, before perfumery, was 20 years in software development and game development, which is certainly not relevant to this topic. So I will move on. Olivia is a professional perfumer. She has over 20 years of experience working both in France and the United States. She currently is in the fine fragrance division at Givaudan, which I think most of you know is the world's largest fragrance house. She's worked in fine fragrance, but also in personal care and air care for other houses as well, Drom and Robertet, which is where she met Miriam. So their relationship goes back quite a way, and they've worked on projects together extensively. More recently, also Olivia has launched her own brand. She's the co-founder of Fragrances with Benefits, which you may have been reading about in the press recently. I know I have, and I'm very excited to learn more about it very soon. Miriam's background is as a fragrance development and natural perfumery expert. She works out of New York City and also out of the West Coast here, and has worked with different fragrance houses like IFF, Agilex, and Robertet, as I mentioned. She works both with the beauty industry as well as with the fragrance industry, and has been in many different roles as in sales, in marketing, and as an evaluator, working in fine fragrance, personal care, and also in, really interestingly, in natural ingredients divisions of fragrance houses. Miriam, as if that wasn't enough, Miriam is also the founder of Palette Naturals and 40 Notes Perfumes, and currently works as a consultant with indie fragrance and beauty brands. So that's just something to note. You're gonna learn a lot from her today, and she's a really great resource for indie brands. One other thing I forgot to mention about Olivia is that she is also an expert, a really recognized expert in natural perfumery ingredients. So for those of you who are natural perfumers in attendance, that's just something to note, that these are two really knowledgeable women when it comes to natural ingredients. So I would love to turn it over to both of you to just tell us a little bit more about your backgrounds, but also about the brands that you've created.
Olivia, go first.
So my background is I started to learn fragrance at ISIPCA. Then
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, I think we're
Olivia, we've got you freezing a little bit.
oh,
We can still, maybe we can.
can you hear me? No.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
now.
Miriam, can you
Yeah, I'll start.
can you go? Can you take over? Switch computer.
Okay.
Okay.
So a little bit about myself. Well, you gave me such a wonderful introduction. So, and I'm going to try to compress 29 years into possibly a little less time, but I even made myself a little roadmap here because I wanted to make sure we didn't get too off track. You know, just as a quick 1-minute introduction, my background originally was in architecture and design, my education. And I'm saying that now only because my constants in life, which I've been reflecting on, are design and the creative process, even through all of this. I mean, I wouldn't trade that education for the world. So it kind of all started there, and that's what took me to New York City. But yes, you're right. My indie to industry, and we'll talk about indie to industry, which is when I coined that term, but it really, my career has gone full circle. And I started it with Griffin Development, which is not even a thing anymore, but it was the company that created all of Bath and Body Works products. So BBW, or Griffin, created the BBW and Victoria's Secret. So before everybody falls off their chairs with, you know, those scent types right now, just think of what the market was like in the 90s. We were still a bar soap country, not a shower gel country. I mean, does anybody remember that? So shower gels really just came in the 90s. So, I mean, yeah, we had them, but I think we kind of shifted then. So anyway, not to get off track, I started on the client side. And what's important about that is that my career there just quickly went from understanding how to give briefs to fragrance houses, to contract manufacturers, and to see how the creative process was happening from the product development side. And then after 4 years, I went to IFF, where I personally was at home and felt like I had just landed in the white hot center of the universe. I mean, to me, I was done. So that was going from the client side to what would be called the supplier side. And in fragrance development, it was at the center of fragrance creation. And so in the New York City office is where I learned, and I first was an evaluator. My roles included evaluation and marketing and sales and traveling internationally, and all that I look at as a huge education in just the whole process of how this industry works, and the from the scent side, but also that scent is only one part of the product that the consumers receive when they buy that product and bring it into their home. So we are so far back in the supply chain and so hidden, and hidden from just the general public, but also from the rest of the industry. It's been hidden for many, many years, but it's become much more transparent. So that's where I was operating and living and learning for many years in New York City. And then my life brought me back to the West Coast, which is where I'm from originally. I'm speaking to you from Portland right now. And on the West Coast, I was still with IFF. And so I learned and had more home care clients. So I saw how candles were made. And I mean, I knew how candles were made, but just the development and scent direction of a lot of home and smaller brands. So anyway, so as not to take you through the whole winding labyrinth of all those years, moved back up to Portland, where there is zero fragrance industry at the time, obviously. And I started my 40 Notes line when I was in Santa Barbara, when I had moved back to California. And it just, you know, that going from industry to indie and then back to industry, I did, you know, went from IFF to then being on my own for a while and really launching that whole 40 Notes idea. And I did create that collection in 2010. It was right during the 08-09 crash. So you can do really good things when the economy tanks. And I brought that out in 2010, thanks to Yosh having that whole West Coast indie perfumery nascent world kind of blossom. But then something in me said, I really wanted to learn more about natural materials. I mean, that was just something it was an internal nudge. And I won't just say I just jumped onto Robertet. It took some time, and I ended up able to work there. I skipped the Agilex part, and that's actually something to remember though, because it's when I first started working with Yosh. So we can talk about that was 07, 05, 07, somewhere in there. I'm looking at you, Yosh, because the years have like so just flipped by. But anyway, Robertet was my dive into natural materials, a beautiful company, family owned, 5th generation. And some of you have maybe heard me say this before. It's like if my career before was a telescope looking up into the sky, when I got to Robertet, it was like a microscope looking down. And by that, I mean, I really learned where the materials came from, how they were grown, how they were processed, the manufacturing. When I say manufacturing, I mean the extraction processes of what goes on in the ground. So I learned and was exposed to all that for a variety of materials, not just florals, but resins and woods, everything. So I got to see how everything really, how we got these great, gorgeous essences. And then fast forward, and that was from 012 to 016. During that time, and I see that Olivia's not back yet. Oh, there she is. Okay, so I see her. So just tell me, Antonia, when you want to switch. I thought she was still offline. It was during that time that my experience with West Coast companies that I was calling on at Robertet with both ingredients and as well as product development, you know, creative development, they were saying, we want natural materials, we want natural blends, and we can't meet those minimums. And that was the real first seeds planted in me that these companies needed to have natural materials accessible to them, which was the sort of forming of my ideas for Palette Naturals. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an overview. I mean, we can't spend the whole time talking about my background. So we'll jump to Olivia and then we can ask some more questions later.
Okay, I hope everyone can hear me now. Is it fine?
Yes.
Is it okay? Yes. Hi, so my name is Olivia Jean. I'm a perfumer at Givaudan now. And I started to learn fragrance with Izipka. I always loved fragrance, and I went to Izipka. After Izipka, I spent 1 year as an assistant at Chanel, where I had access to wonderful ingredients and the most beautiful raw material. From yeah, I'm muted. From there, I went to Robert Ingras, where I learned a lot about natural raw material. I was able to see all the process of the natural ingredient, how you get from the flower to the essential oil, and how everything, all the magic happened. Then I moved to Paris as a perfumer junior, and in 2005, I moved to the United States. And in 2018, I went from Robertet to Drôme, and now Drôme became a part of Givaudan. So now I'm perfumer at Givaudan, and that's it.
Did your love of fragrance begin when you were young, very young?
I'm sorry.
Did your love of fragrance begin when you were very young?
Yes, I always loved fragrances, even as a very small girl. And I decided to become a perfumer when I was 13 years old, when I went to Grasse with my parents. And I discovered that there was someone that actually made fragrance, which I had no idea. And I said, this is it. I want to be a perfumer. So
I love that.
very simple.
Thank you both so much for telling us about your incredible backgrounds. When we were preparing for this conversation, we decided it made a lot of sense to set some context for the conversation in terms of what resources are available to brands who are hoping to scale their fragrance production, and specifically talk a little bit about how the quantity that you plan to produce and sell really, depending on how much quantity, will lead you toward different resources externally that can help you. So I thought, Miriam, since you've worked with both indie on the indie side as well as in the fragrance houses, you could perhaps outline that for us.
So, and I think everybody on the call, most everybody knows the other definitions of artisanal and indie and fragrance foundation. And we thought, instead of, for the purposes of this call, which Yosh was so clear on the way of scaling, we thought, let's define it by the amount of oil potentially that you would use per year. So I've got my little notes here. We were thinking less than 1 kilo per year, which is 2.2 pounds. We're guessing through our experience, you're probably in the artisanal handmade and often in a home lab. So if you're using less than 1 kilo a year, you're at home, most likely, or in a studio, or maybe you've got another career and this is something you're doing on the side. So it's really a very, very small and manageable amount. 5 to 10 pounds per year. We're saying you're possibly doing it at home still, or maybe with a small lab or staff, maybe small batch contracting of some of the newer companies who have popped up, and we're gonna address those later. And then 25 pounds or greater of oil, you are most likely in some sort of production. And production facility, and you can contract, then you might actually be able to give that brief to a fragrance house. So if that feels intuitively right to everybody on the call, you could sort of nod. In terms of your own business, if you see yourself falling into one of those categories, those are the contextual assumptions we made to help you today. So, and if you're beyond that, then you're on this call, you're trolling us because you want indie information.
If you're making more than 50 pounds a year, we wonder why you're here. Unless you're here because you work with Olivia at Givaudan. Yeah, absolutely helpful. Thank you. And as Miriam said, there's some really great companies. Perfumers Apprentice, of course, Travis is on the call. Sarah Horowitz, Parfum in Los Angeles area. Notology, the people who were featured in last Thursday's event, are great examples of maybe you can't yet create a brief for 50 pounds and go to a fragrance house, but it's more than you can handle. Those are some excellent resources for compounding and filling. And we have included all of them and more in our list that you guys will get at the end of the call. So Miriam, another question for you. Since you've been working as a consultant with indie brands, what do you kind of hear as consistent pain points when brands are looking to scale their production?
I would say, you know, I know I was going to give you the top 3, and I want to give you this visual. There's one, and then there's all the rest. Number 1 pain point that I consistently hear are minimums. How do you meet? I mean, this is assuming you've got your idea, you started working, you've been creating for a while. How can you meet the minimums just to scale at all in any way, shape, or form? Because minimums come in the form of the fragrance oil, if you're going to subcontract that out or have a fragrance house, but it's also packaging minimums. There's really no minimums on labeling, but labels can be very expensive, especially coatings in our industry. And then the contract fillers have minimums, whether they're doing it turnkey for you or not. So you're running into minimums all along the way. So I would say that's the number 1 pain point. But I really did do some thinking on this, and I think the next 2 or 3 that people, and by virtue of being on this call, if you could think about those, then that would help you, is understanding the entire workings of this supply chain. So if you could be a helicopter and watch your product move through space, could you actually see every single place it had to go before it got onto the shelf or onto your website? If you can't, that's a pain point that you need to figure out, and there's a lot of help on this call. Can you fly over your product and watch it get to where it needs to go? If there's a mystery there for you, please uncover it, because you need to know how that works. And maybe that's just the architecture and me wanting to see things from a floor plan, but you must be able to see it. Otherwise, you'll run into a mystery and you won't know how to get around that barrier. And then everything else, cost and use, cost of raw materials, timing, things just take a long time to develop. That's just a reality. You know, without telling tales out of school, Olivia and I are working on a project that started last summer, and now it's in freeze frame because of this virus. So, you know, you have to just understand timing. Some will be in your control, some won't.
Yeah, thank you for that. So a fun question, we'll go from pain to joy. Olivia, take us into a day in the life of a professional perfumer at a large international house. What is your lab like? I wish we were there in your lab right now. What kind of clients do you work with, and what type of projects do you work on?
So right now I'm not in my lab, I'm at home and I work from home. So it's very different than it is usually. And on a regular day, a perfumer works on different projects at the same time. I don't work in a lab. I work in an office, and I create the fragrance on the computer. So it's not that glamorous, but this is the way it works. And then the formula is given to my assistant, and she weights the formula and put the formula in application. And depending on the project, the application is going to be EDT or a candle or a shower gel. And then I can smell the fragrance in the application and make the appropriate modification for the request of the customer.
How many modifications do you typically make?
It really depends on the project. It can be from, I don't know, if you're very lucky, from 3 maybe to 200, 300. For very, very long project, it can be a very long process.
What are your favorite types of projects?
The creative types. No, that's true. I mean, when you get to work with a creator, this is where all the fun comes, because you have in front of you someone who has a creative mind, and it fires up your creative mind. And if the person trusts you, and if you get this amazing connection, then you can do wonder, because one idea pushes another one, and then you can really push the barrier and try new ways.
Just in that experience, is that when you're working with a brand's creative director?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I could see how that would be really, really rewarding.
Yeah, someone who takes the position as art director. Actually, this is really what it comes down to. The person who direct the perfumers. And
that person would be from an external brand. That's your client.
Right, that would be the client. Inside the fragrance house, the perfumer is absolutely not alone. We work in a team with evaluation, with salesperson, with the lab, with the regulatory people. There's a lot of people around the perfumer helping the creation, and it's not a single person project. It's a lot of people involved and doing their part to help to win the project, because every project is a challenge in the way that we are all in competition with each other and only one wins. So you have to win the project.
Oh, can you talk about that a little bit more? How does that work?
Usually when a brand puts a project on the market, they give it to different creation house, and we have to win the project because we compete against each other.
So you compete against other fragrance houses as well as against internal perfumers?
Yes, sometimes, yes. Yeah.
Ooh, and you
yes.
all stay friends?
Yes. Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes, because we can also help each other.
Right. That's amazing. Since you're starting to talk about roles, I think, Miriam, you've worked as that initial touch point before for a fragrance house in sales. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what it looks like when a brand approaches a fragrance house. How does the project start? What are the other roles involved? I know Olivia just touched on that quite a bit. And then also, what's the internal structure, and how does one work with a fragrance house? Does someone always get to sit with Olivia, for example, and work side by side creatively, or is it different for different projects?
Okay, so there were about 4 questions there. So I'll try to remember from the beginning. The internal structure of a fragrance house, well, first of all, let me start. The answer to your question is different if you're an existing client or a brand new client. And so most of the people that Olivia was probably just referencing, those big clients, those are existing clients, all the big brands that you have all heard of in the fine fragrance world, from Dior to Calvin Klein to, those big brands in the 90s and early 2000s and 80s even, all the way up to the personal care, the hair care, the Unilevers of the world, the Procter & Gamble's of the world. Those are humongous clients. So there's no initial intake because they're existing relationships for years. But to bring it back home to this audience, if you're a brand new client, that would look different because you would have an initial meeting with the salesperson to find out, can we work together? So let me just hit the pause button there for a second and say, what's going on behind the scenes is this triangle, probably more of an octagon now, of sales, perfumery, and marketing, or sales, perfumery, and evaluation. That's the core triangle. And then the other triangles, I would say, is regulatory, the marketing group, and the labs. So it's really like the 6-pointed star. You are all working together. But initially, the client comes to the salesperson and gives them the brief. What are we going to be working on? And if it's a smaller brand, They may or may not be briefing 2 or 3 or more houses. They may just come to one house and say, can you work with me? Can I work with you? And the salesperson would say, and walk them through, oh, many questions. What's the size of the project? What is your budget? What is your cost per pound? What kind of a project are you looking for? Is it personal care? Is it hair care? Is it fine fragrance? And the salesperson then goes back after doing a nice in-depth, intake, and meets with the team, not all the people I mentioned, but usually management for one, to see if this is a client that has potential. And Olivia, you can sort of nod or cut in, because potential for a new client is one of the key indicators as to whether the fragrance house will say yes. And potential is something where the house looks to see, can they meet the minimums? Is there a business there? Is there something there that we can say yes to? Because something you may or may not all know, it's not really a secret, but it's not advertised. A fragrance house doesn't charge for, or at least up until now, it doesn't charge for that initial creative work. But what they do charge for is all the oil that they're going to be selling you for that project, and they retain the formula for that. That's the relationship a client has with the fragrance house, because that's the intellectual property of the fragrance house, but they're selling it only to you in your brand to get into your product to then go to market. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. You're not going to walk away tomorrow and give it to somebody else, because you are invested in each other. So does that start to make some sense right there at the front end, so you understand the mindset?
Right. Which is why we thought it was important that people knew the types of quantities that you would have to produce in order to work with a fragrance house, because they need to make their money by selling you the oil.
That's correct. And I mean, that's fair. That's the business model.
Yeah, absolutely.
An indie perfumer isn't going to call up IFF and say, can you create this for me? And P.S. I'm only going to buy 2.2 pounds per year.
Right.
Because IFF simply, unless they create a whole new division, and I used to work there, so that says we're going to just work with indie perfumers. But the good news is that some big houses are seeing, well, not only the good news, it's the reality check, is that indie perfumery has upended the industry. And it got everybody's attention. And it
good job.
What happened was that it was, well, I'm getting off topic, because I do want to answer your question. I'm looking at, what was the second you did? Oh, evaluation and perfumery, by the way. Olivia and I worked together. I was in sales when I was at Robertet for ingredients, but since I had been an evaluator, we worked very closely smelling together on some projects. Since I was on the West Coast, I'd keep traveling east and work with her and come back west. But the evaluator plays a role, I would say, is like an editor to a writer. So I'm not a published author, so I don't know this for a fact, but I think it's true. The editor reads it, reflects back, and the evaluator will smell. And the evaluator is like the liaison between the client and the perfumer.
Right.
So that's key. Clients don't just walk in the door and sit and meet with Olivia. She's working with her valuable time and energy on these projects that essentially she needs to win, or the perfumers need or want to win. So nobody's going to be taking her valuable time hour after hour just sitting with her. So they're very closely, I won't say protected, but you can't just have a perfumer meeting with everybody, because they're working. So the evaluators are smelling and then working with sales and then presenting to the client.
You mentioned also bringing a brief. What either one of you could answer this, certainly. What does a good brief look like? So if someone wanted to bring a creative brief to a fragrance house, what should they include in that?
So a good brief gives a lot of detail, and it brings you in a world, in a universe. First, you need to tell what kind of application you want, if it's a fine fragrance, if it's a shampoo, if it's a candle. So it's going to be a different work depending on the support. But no matter what the support is, you need to have a story that you tell to the perfumer, because this story is going to help the creation, and it's going to help us dig into your mind and your word and translate it into an order. And the more detail you give, the better we can translate and give something close to what you have in mind. And even if you didn't really have exactly that in mind, it's maybe a different approach that you didn't think about, as long as it fits your idea and your concept. And so this is one thing, that's the story. Then we need a price, because depending on the price we can use different ingredients. And then we need to know where this fragrance is going to be sold, because depending on what country is going to be sold, we have different regulation to apply. So we really need all this information to start the project.
Right. So the more details, the better, everybody knows.
Yes, a lot of details and a lot of thinking before writing a brief. It's really important to pause, to write all your idea. If you can do a mood board, a texture, color, picture, everything helps.
Wonderful. I remember when we were talking that you all mentioned that when you did work with Yosh, when you were both at Robertet on Koenig, that she had written a really wonderful brief. And we thought it would be really fun to talk some more about this project. Koenig is a beautiful fragrance. I know it well. My husband wears it a lot, and I absolutely love it. It also won one of the first Art and Olfaction Awards. Congratulations to all three of you. Why don't you talk to us about what that experience was like? And Yosh, please chime in here too, with the three of you working on that project together as a team.
Who starts?
I'll start, and then I'll hand it over, just to say that Yosh and I had a pre-existing relationship. And I think that is key to anybody on the call who's thinking that, oh, wow, that sounds like a good thing. So we did have that relationship, and that helped me as the salesperson convince and really say, I think this is a great client. Let's work with her. You know, please say yes. I really wanted them to say yes, and they did say yes, thankfully. So a pre-existing relationship based on some success is what helped bring her in the door. And then Yosh's brief was like a movie script.
Yes.
Fantastic. Images, stories, aesthetics. She had graphics. I mean, it was incredible. And I believe she'll speak to the fact that she had a designer. That helped Yosh and Olivia create a collaborative relationship where I just kind of stepped back so that they could create their magic, because as a perfumer, Yosh had the language, but I loved how she said in her talk with the American Perfumer that she had an ego death. And I don't know what that story refers to, but she exhibited setting her ego aside and giving Olivia perfumer's crown, whereas she was creative director. And it was a great relationship.
Thank you so much, Miriam. I really appreciate that. And I think that opportunity really actually elevated my business. Of course, the work that we did together at Agilex was fantastic also, but that was really a duplication of the fragrances that were existing. And so that process to me was more mathematical and a little bit less emotional. And that was a huge learning experience. And I'm quite sad that they canceled me as a client because they got bought by Firmenich, and my numbers didn't meet their requirements. And so the irony of that is because I had an existing relationship with Givaudan, they took on my project, and then I had them reformulated by Rodrigo Flores. So that was like mind-boggling, also because of existing relationships. And so my projects at Robertet, that was for me, like, I think also to be able to work with Olivia so closely. Yes, of course, the creative brief was important because I felt that was what I could control, and I had a very specific vision for that fragrance that I wanted to create. which is, inspired by the Bavarian forest, because I spent a lot of time in Bavaria because I already had a lot of business in Europe, and I just found that place kind of remarkable, and all the castles and kind of fairy tale land, and I wanted to modernize that. And I think those meetings with Olivia were so precious, and you, because it also just felt like we were in this like crazy little bubble. But that creative brief, I think, is really important, and it's something that I've, it's sort of like you do something well, and you share it, and that has become one of my like consulting arms of the business, because a lot of people think it's just creative, but there's also a lot of the high concept business part that's important. And so there's I guess the one-page business plan that must accompany the creative brief. And I think a lot of the consulting that I do for indie perfumers is they want to control the whole thing. And this is the part about the ego death. When you have that ego death, what happens is you get expanded and amplified, because you have the perfumer, you have the regulatory, which for me is absolutely necessary to be compliant when you're exporting to, as I do, to the EU, to the Middle East, to Japan, and every effing country has their own regulatory. And I saw my old distributor in Dubai, Catherine, she's on the call. She's gonna be a judge on the startup panel, but like, holy moly, that paperwork is crazy, because regulatory on the perfume side has to match then the export papers. So all that has to come into play in the brief, because there's the money brief, the business brief, and then the creative brief. And that's where you can, as an independent perfumer, not dictate to a perfumer who's got lots of experience and also thousands of much more materials in their library at their disposal. Why would I tell Olivia what to do when I only have like 500 materials, and she's got stuff that I've never heard of, I've never worked with, and the quality. Like, they also work with farmers, distillers, they're doing stuff themselves that I would never have access to. Of course, at Robertet, I've done lots of perfumers breakfasts, so I actually knew quite a few of the Robertet materials. So that was quite fun. But I think, to speak to Olivia's openness, she also didn't feel the need to tell me how to do my job. And so that was fun to really collaborate. And I know how rare that is, because on the other projects, I've only worked with sales and evaluators. And so every project is slightly different, but that particular project with Koenig was really amazing. And when I submitted it to the IAO, I just personally felt, as a perfumer, that I didn't really own the whole process, and I wanted to share that spotlight with Olivia. And I think, karmically, we were rewarded by winning, a double-blind juried competition. And that, I think, also, thank God, proved to Robertet and maybe some other houses that it's also about artistic merit. And I think sometimes in life, my parents are certainly like this. They always want to know, well, how is it doing business-wise? And sometimes I just want to say, like, F you about the business side, because that's not, it's of course part and parcel, but I think when you can do something for creative love and passion and then be rewarded for it, it's like such a great feeling. And so I want to thank both of you, because that to me was like very seminal in my career, because it also has allowed me to just think about my business and my place in the firmament a little bit differently. So I don't feel, I love smelling materials, although I had some consulting jobs that has prevented me from being aggressive on smelling. So I feel personally okay to be a little bit more distant and kind of orchestrate things rather than having to control every process. But as a business owner, you have to micromanage everything. But this creative process, it's amazing. It's like being a film director and having a cinematographer do their job. And it's like, yeah, I just love being the more overview instead of being like so close to it. And I feel like Olivia and I had a great creative relationship, which is also very rare. So I want to thank you both, because that was like a magic project. And I still, I love that fragrance, and I wear it all the time. So that was epic. Awesome.
Thank you, Yosh. And yeah, you're right. When you say create a bubble, this is exactly what is happening when there's a great relationship between the perfumer and the art director, which is what the role you embraced.
Yeah.
And thank you for giving the trust and the freedom for the creation, because this is also something very important to allow the perfumer to expand and to try different venue and be more out there. Thank you.
It also sounds a little bit Yosh, like your ego death was driven by your desire to scale your brand.
Yes, yes. I think that's also very true, because you can't be a one-woman band and expect to really go very far. You know, I felt like I didn't actually get that much support from Agilex, although Regulations, that guy Mario, I don't know if he's still at that company. I had like a very deep, intimate relationship with Regulations at Agilex, the poor guy. Every day I was like, oh my God, what do I do? So I have to say, for anyone who has to do regulatory and compliance, if you don't have a lawyer, you wanna make friends with that person too. He's like, really was so helpful. But yeah, I can't remember what you just asked me.
Oh, just that the ego death was required in order for you to scale, it sounds like.
Yes, and I feel like when I mentor and advise younger brands who are starting out, they're very tight with the, I should own the formula. And I just go, you know what, fuck your formula. They've got like so much stuff that's gonna go beyond your formula. Like, what? You know, like I mean, it's not disparaging, but it's like the difference between having a food truck, which is obviously, who doesn't love a food truck, to going to like a Michelin starred restaurant where everything is orchestrated to a T, and you're just like, it's such a different experience. And so every step of the way has its own gratifying thing, because I love being gritty. I love making stuff, and I love, you know, the hand, just getting my hands dirty. But it's a very different experience to sit back and watch everything happen as it should be, and also having the access to the experts. I mean, you know, I didn't go to perfume school, and Olivia's graduated from ASIPCA, so she's gonna know the different aspects of also not just the chemistry, but also as I develop ancillary products, she's gonna understand how to translate that into body care, hair care, laundry detergent, all that other stuff. So I don't have the personal skills for that, but I have tons of creative energy. And so even the projects that I'm working on now, I just have a different relationship to, I mean, so for me, it's all about the creative now, right? That's where I get my juice, and that's where I can like figure out all the things that I want to do and like how that works. And then I can focus on things that are, help me grow the brand, rather than, you know,
Yeah.
And also, I don't know, Miriam, will you discuss it a little bit, but like, I don't have the math skills to do cost of use. And so as I scaled my business, even now I have business partners who manage that part, but the Excel sheets that they give me, it's just like too much for my brain to handle, to figure out, like, you know, I got to figure out the business costs, the supply costs, the blah, 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 blah. There's so many Excel sheets going back and forth that I don't want to think about. Like, I just want to give my final price per pound, and then, you know, give a range, and then let the perfumer decide which rose she's going to use based on my cost per pound.
Yep, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
We have just a few more questions, and then we'll do these briefly, and then we'll open it up to everyone's questions. We've both, actually all of you, I think, have mentioned regulatory guidelines. We know as the brand scales, and especially if they want to be sold in the EU, that the level of regulations that they need to adhere to really increases. And Olivia, I was specifically wondering, what are those regulations? We did, I believe, list some of the information in our resource list, but also how do you help a brand ensure compliance?
So yeah, being compliant is definitely a big challenge for smaller brands when they scale up. And it's really important because a lot of the major retail places require at least the IFRA and California Prop 65 if you sold in California. So this is really the bare minimum if you sell in the United States. If you want to sell in Europe, for example, you need to be EU compliant. And to tell the truth, a perfumer is not allowed to meet the regulation. We have very sophisticated software to help us. And then we have a regulatory team that also help us. It's very difficult because each ingredient, for example, each essential oil is made with a lot of, it's not made, but it's composed by a lot of chemical, and all these chemical some have a limitation. To give you an example, the rose essential oil contains methyl eugenol. Methyl eugenol is very regulated, but you have methyl eugenol in other essential oil. And then when you accumulate this essential oil in a formula, you need to make the calculation of the total of methyl eugenol that is in the formula, not just in one ingredient. And for this, you need to have a very sophisticated software to make the calculation and have all the information to start with. So it's very difficult to do it on your own. I would say impossible.
That was what I was thinking, and I want to point out a note that Yosh put in the chat window. Travis, who's some of you can see on the screen, from Perfumer's Apprentice, also does compliance for smaller brands. So if you're not ready to work with a fragrance house that has the sophisticated tools that someone like Givaudan would have, you can also talk to Perfumer's Apprentice. And I'm not sure about Notology and Sarah Horowitz, but they likely can help with that as well. Oh, someone was just actually asking, are there perfumers that will work with a small brand to create a scent? We can address that in a minute, yeah. So yeah, it sounds like the ability to do that from a home lab is, I think you just use the word impossible. Is that right, Olivia?
Yeah, if you don't have the tool, it sounds very, very, very complicated.
Yeah. So definitely think about that as you're developing your brands, and if you are scaling and want to sell in the EU and other places where the regulations are pretty restrictive, and for safety reasons, for good reasons, maybe if you're not ready to talk to someone like Givaudan, you could speak to someone like Travis, the Perfumer's Apprentice. It'd be helpful. So Olivia, a more fun question for you. What brings you the most joy at your work, and what would you say to anybody in the audience who might be hoping to become a professional perfumer at an international house like Givaudan one day?
So definitely what gives me the most joy is to work on creative project with an art director who knows where he or she wants to go, because you are able to build a bubble and to really immerse yourself in there and create. And there's always something magic happening in between two people working on a project, and it's a fun experience, and it's always nice to meet people with whom you work with. And as a advice for young perfumer, I would say learn the ingredient, because really this is the basic. And what is really important is when you smell an ingredient for the first time, write down everything that comes to your mind, even if it's crazy, even if it says your grandmother drawer, or it doesn't matter, write it down, because one day, you don't know when, but one day you will need that specific feeling or sensation or mood, and then you can go back, dig, and this will help you make unique creations that are really personal to your own universe.
I think I want to actually do that just for fun.
And it's fun. It's a lot of fun. Yes.
That's amazing. I'm actually going to communicate that to other people. That's just, a lot of times, even just our customers will come in and ask, oh, can I just sit with one of your perfumers that are in the shop and smell ingredients and get their impressions of the ingredients? how do they describe them, but how much more fun even just to use your own nose and say, yeah, it's just these random things that come when you're smelling ingredients. It's beautiful.
I'm still using the notebook that I started when I was at Izipka, and during my entire career, I complete it every time I smell a new ingredient, and it's really important to do that.
I absolutely love that. Miriam, since we asked you to talk about pain points. In closing, what words of wisdom do you have for brands who are hoping to scale, especially an indie brand that's hoping to scale?
Well, I thought about that question, and it really hits home to give you two angles of answer. One is personal, and one is for the brand. And the reason I'm starting with the personal is because behind every brand is a person, and each of you are either the founder or the maker, and now an entrepreneur, if that's going to be your sole mission. And so really the number one words of wisdom is to stay congruent with yourself. What does that mean? Really understand who you are. Are you wanting to stay the perfumer and the maker? Are you a marketer? Are you getting funding and you want to be the CEO? So you're going to be overviewing everybody else, doing these things. Who are you as you lead this process? Most people here came to this call through perfumery, so I'm assuming we have more makers. And the question is, if you're going to grow that brand, are you prepared to step into possibly, which is to say, stepping away from perfumery for a while to be the CEO of this company? Because that may happen. So that first word of wisdom is to stay congruent with yourself as you manage those steps. That could be a whole talk all on itself. I mean, that's culture practice. The second word of wisdom kind of goes back, and might sound silly because it's all about cost and use, but my advice is use the highest quality ingredients you can. Build your margins from the inside out. So what do I mean by that? Make sure your brand can sustain the quality you're putting in the bottle. So you've got to actually understand that piece of how much do these cost. So I know that as I'm creating, I'm projecting out this is going to be a $300 bottle of perfume or a $80 shampoo. Can my margins support that? So while that might not sound so sexy, it's the foundation of, if you're going to create a brand, it's all about cost of goods, cost and use. So understand that and my whole motto, of course, the packaging industry might not love me for saying this, but let's put the money in the bottle or in the tube rather than on the outside, what's going to get thrown away. I mean, we need really great technology for those materials for sustainability, but I'm all about quality in the bottle and affording that and building that into the project from the get-go. So that would be my business word of advice as you're formulating a concept. So that
I would chime in and say, because I know and love so many indie perfumers and indie brands, especially those that we carry in the store, that I've seen that exact problem happen so many times where the cost of goods are not built into the product. The perfume wins an award or gets great reviews on Base Notes or Fragrantica. The perfumer is actually not even breaking even on the fragrance.
Right.
So because especially if they're selling it through retailers where we take our margin, they haven't built in the retail margin and they haven't built in the full cost of goods. They're doing it maybe starting out of passion, and then they realize, oh, I actually have a business here. But then they either are going to have to reformulate or raise all their prices publicly.
Right.
So I think that's really excellent advice.
Right. I mean, it's literally just like I said in the beginning, make yourself a bird, look at your project from up above and see it at the store. How did it get there? It had to go from creation price to wholesale price to retail price. Now, if you're going to sell online, you can capture that margin from the beginning. And I'm not a business major, so I'm talking to you as a creator. Margin from you making it to you selling it at a retail price point is a very healthy margin. But if you could build into that someday you might have to sell it at wholesale, all of a sudden you're only going to make half that, but you'll get it into all of these stores. So now understand that as you're formulating with that fabulous Rose and Ambrette that we all love, you know, so I'm just saying, zoom in, zoom out, stay congruent.
Wonderful. So we definitely, Yosh, if time is permitting, would love to take some questions.
Yeah, I think we do have time for questions. So I think there's a hand raise that you can do before you unmute yourself. And then thank you for sharing that point about costing. I think a lot of, at least for a lot of mentees and a lot of the consulting that I do, a lot of people start direct to consumer and then hate the process when they just didn't do the math properly. So if you want to scale and you have your sights on being in, you know, I think I had, as a small business, I had like around 400 stores worldwide, which is very small compared to, you know, I don't even make a blip compared to these other huge brands that are selling millions and millions of units. Everyone needs to think about exactly that future goal and work backwards and understand all the players in between. And so that might be a session on its own. So I see that there's a lot of interest for the festival to have a 2.0 masterclass. Packaging will be a session and pricing will be a session, 1,000%. So let's move it over to questions.
While we were figuring that out, the hand raise, I see a question that I think I could help answer.
Okay.
From Cristobal Valencia, wondering, aside from the list of distributors and stockists that we listed in our resource list, what is a great way to find stockists? So aside from, I think we put in 11 independent fragrance stores in the list. There are absolutely other ways that you can sell your perfume. It doesn't have to be just a perfume store. I know some of the brands that I carry say they do really well, particularly in lifestyle stores, clothing stores, other small boutiques like that. And I can only really speak to small retail, not to big Nordstrom level retail. But I would think about the kind of brand that you have and what other brands might be compatible with it, and literally just reach out to those stores. So I know one of the brands we carry is also carried in a little hipster, succulent, cute home goods store in Oakland, and that's actually her top store. So her perfume brand does better there than it does in any of the perfume shops that it's in. So just think about what type of brands your brand might be compatible with, what environment your brand might look good in, and who are those salespeople that you think will really get you and be able to sell you, and just approach them. And I know other stores will hate me for saying this, but we always say, don't just show up at our store with your stuff and, you know, interrupt our flow of our day, but actually in-person meetings are really valuable. So even if you, maybe it depends on the personality, but in our store, we don't mind someone walking in as long as they understand that all they might be able to do is hand off samples. And we really don't like to smell your samples in front of you, to be honest. So leaving us samples and putting a face to the brand and a personality to the brand is wonderful. But maybe just a sample drop off and a hello.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that is it's not a bad problem, but it's just sort of like reality check. Is a lot of perfumers that I've worked with see like Chanel at the department store and think that their creation is on equal level because they've put all this hair, this care, the most expensive materials that they can afford and expect to be on the same shelf. Well, you know what? I was on the same shelf elbow to elbow with Frederic Malle, Le Labo, and Kilian. And just right there, that gave me so much anxiety because they have millions of dollars at their disposal for just marketing. And also they have staff support and then that whole thing, commissions, marketing dollars, all of that comes into play also. So when you are talking about smaller stores and boutique owners, you know, that's a kind of a different game altogether, and it's not a one size fit all. So I was never a person to do a business plan, and you don't have to do a business plan, but you need to think about it and take a minute to also just study. You don't have to go to business school, but if you just go to 10 different stores and look at 10 different brands and actually just look at their websites, it'll take you a couple of hours to figure out someone's distribution models. And when you do that, that's how you understand how someone else is doing it. And then you can take your brand and ask yourself, you know, do I have all the, it's like going outside. You're not going to just go outside with a shirt and no pants. You know, you're going to want to like make sure you're buttoned up in as many areas as possible. And the areas that you're not comfortable with, you need to seek outside help, right? So if you're not like I love doing creative briefs, and I do them for clients all the time, and I love doing the marketing, and I'm good at sales, but I hate sales. I can do them. I can do desk sides. You know, there's all the different things that you're good at. Stick to those and hire out all the things that you're not good at. Okay, so this is a good question. There's a naturals question, and because both of you have naturals experience, could you speak to, sorry, I don't mean to like take over, but I want to be mindful of the time. The naturals part, that's a really good question, because I think a lot of people want to scale natural brands.
Okay, I can take this one. So yes, definitely when you write your brief, this is something you have to precise. I'm answering the question when hiring fragrance house, any pain point when formulating using only natural. So yes, you can request that your project will be using only natural, and this is going to be part of the project, and you have to integrate it in your request and in the price. And this is also something you need to think about it when you set up the price. If you want to use only natural, then you have to give yourself a little more freedom. I mean, a little more, a higher price, so we can use good natural and stick to the project.
And I'll add to that, that if you could state in the brief that you want to be ISO 9235 compliant, this will do at minimum two things for you. Number one, depending on the claim that you make, and if you say you're 100% natural somewhere in your marketing copy, not that the FDA is going to knock on your door, because they're not, but so many brands are using that inappropriately, especially in the food space, and we've already been shifting away from it. You have something to lean on and say, I am ISO 9235 compliant to the definition of natural aromatic raw materials. So that's number one. But number two, it gives the perfumer, which Olivia would already do, but it gives the perfumer just the knowing that they're going to use essential oils, absolutes, fractions, isolates, everything in the definition of ISO 9235. And what that gives you, the customer, the client, is a more complex, more sparkling, more nuanced end result. This isn't just an aromatherapy blend. I don't mean to say just, but an aromatherapy blend is just using essential oils. But a natural perfume creation is not an aromatherapy blend. It's a much more complex, in-depth creation, which Olivia is masterful at creating.
Yeah, the ISO 9235 is very important. Yeah, thank you for mentioning it. It's very important because this is really the key to make sure that your fragrance is natural 100%.
I see a couple more questions here that I could definitely answer. For the person asking, Andrea, asking how to find perfumers who work with small brands in creation. There's a list in the resource guide that Yosh posted, and we can post it again at the end, that has people who do formulation, compounding, and filling. That's Perfumer's Apprentice, Sarah Horowitz. Ministry of Scent, my company, does just the formulation side for brands, for customers. You'll see that list there, and those are all people who can work with smaller batches versus fragrance house. And then for Leiko Lin, the how do retailers choose which new perfume brands to sell, who pursues whom? It's a two-way street. So at least I can say, again, boutique level, I can't speak for the bigger department stores. We pursue people and people pursue us. When we first opened, the first perfumer I spoke to actually was Yosh, and she very kindly, well, amazingly turned out to be a massive resource in terms of bolstering this community of independent perfumers, and gave me a list of almost 30 perfumers to contact. So at first I did all the outreach when I opened the store. But within a year of the store being open, we now have a storage room full of samples that are sent to us constantly, and a team of 4 or 5 people who do evaluation of brands. So, and then one other person was asking, how do you pick? Every store is different. We're kind of like the Willy Wonka's chocolate factory of perfume. I think we like very unique, beautiful, original, independent scents. But we also are usually looking to fill some gaps in our store. So sometimes we start receiving requests for a certain type of ingredient, iris, I want iris. And so then when someone comes in with a brand that's got one of the most gorgeous irises we've ever smelled, it's probably gonna have a better chance of getting in. And then of course we look at reviews, blogs, and our customers' repeated requests for certain brands.
I want to go back for a quick minute because I don't think, Miriam, you mentioned the naturals question is you've, as a supplier, have helped mitigate this pain point of how do you scale a naturals brand. If you could touch on your amazing concept of Palette Naturals, because I think it's important as brands come on the market, sustainability, naturals is so important. And so, you know, brands, retailers who didn't really want to carry naturals before because they didn't want to carry aromatherapy as much. We've seen a shift in green business, in sustainable business. We've got sustainable perfumery out there now. And I think people are afraid of the greenwashing, but so there is a market for slow perfumery, for seed to scent. Can you speak a little bit about how you're helping small brands scale that part?
So, I mean, to really answer the question directly, Palette Naturals grew out of the pain point that I saw and experienced firsthand with the brands that I was interacting with when I was at Robertet. Now, I happen to be on the West Coast, which I believe this might still be true, is really an incubator coast, right? Very entrepreneurial, very new thought, new thinking, and a lot of green, I say that in quotes, but clean green brands in 2010, 11, 12, 13 were really energized and starting to come up. I was seeing them, and many I had to say no to. Sorry, you can't come to work. And I thought there's a potential business here. Mm-hmm. And what Palette Naturals answers are 3 questions immediately off the top. 100% natural perfumery. So it's a collection of perfumery accords, by the way, but it's 100% natural with a transparent ingredient list, which is pretty unheard of, and no minimums. And what that gives the formulator, and I say formulator because it's people in labs, it's beauty brands, it's not just indie perfumers, the ability to be completely transparent with every raw material that's in their blend. And the accords put the creativity in their hands. So I'm not a fragrance house, but I took 15, 16 months to create these accords before launching in 2017. And they're by olfactive family. So it's a kit of parts, building blocks by olfactive family for you, for the chemist, for the formulator in the contract manufacturing house, whomever that wants to use natural blends. And by building these olfactive families upon each other, it's shortcutting a little bit for you because you don't, of course, you're not going to become Olivia overnight. But it allows you, if you cannot work with Givaudan, you cannot work with a fragrance house, it still gives you the freedom to have these blends and to start playing with them. And that's the pain point that Palette Naturals is answering, which grew out of what I saw. So I hope that's helpful in a nutshell there. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to learn there. And of course, like I said, if you want Olivia's creations, yes, you'll have to work with her. But short of that, you can start studying yourself actually and just training your nose with the collection because they're very, very well designed, but they're in their olfactive family. And I think one of my biggest pet peeves, I won't name the brand, but it was a retail brand that had fragrances with the name of the ingredient on it, but olfactively it wasn't that ingredient. And I was like, what the F, man? We're training the population to not even know to be, again, transparent and congruent with what that material really smells like. So I guess that's one of my truth bombs, is that you have to be truthful about what you're smelling, and then just riff on it from there, but know where you're starting from. That's just me.
Are there any other questions?
Wow. Okay. I'm gonna have to put the end to it, even though this is like, we can talk for hours on this. Thank you everyone for coming. This has been so informative and very, very insightful. I want to give a shout out to Miriam, Antonia, and Olivia for giving their, you know, this has really been a charitable endeavor, this whole festival, because this would normally be like a consulting hour or two with these three. And so thank you so much for your generosity. And also I do want to invite everyone to watch the Scent and Manufacturing. That was really informative. This will also be on YouTube later. And then I would suggest that everyone come to the Scent and Startups, because we'll have 10 brands presenting, and the judges will also comment. And so they'll speak a little bit to this unique selling position and brand strategy and scalability, because I think when you are starting, that's going to be on May 31st before the closing ceremony. You think you have this original idea, and these trend forecasters and buyers and publicists have seen your idea like 25 times or more. And so what is really a truly original narrative? There's also some videos on the IGTV. Amanda from WeWear gave some examples of like the best new underrated brands from UK and EU, and that was sensational. And I just want to thank everyone for participating, being a part of the Aroma Village. Obviously, we have so much content. We're going to do a 2.0, do some master classes. We want to dig a little bit deeper. We're going to address packaging, and we're going to address more of the business side of the scalability and pricing. I see that that's like, it's not my favorite consulting job, but I do a lot of it, only because I've been down that road. So we're gonna really get some help and help, like maybe do like an incubator class or something. So thank you everyone for being here, and yeah, and keep blending. You know, this is really meant to be like an encouragement, not like, oh, you can't make it. No, we're saying here are the steps. Start with your, you know, your immediate goals, and then plan for the future, so we can all support you in your dreams, because each one of you has a story to tell, and we're super excited to support and grow that business. So thank you very much.
And Yosh, thank you so much
Thank
for putting
you.
the festival together. It's been absolutely inspiring and so much fun, and also gave me an opportunity to meet and get to know these two beautiful women so much better. So really appreciate it. Looking forward to the next sessions. Everybody should check out all of the sessions. They're really interesting.
Yeah, and if you want a break later tonight at 5 p.m., it's going to be Scent and Alchemy, where it's not going to be pens and papers. It's just going to be super chill. It's like meditation, self-healing, and a cacao ceremony. So that's going to be more performative, where you can just like watch and relax, rather than this like thinking. And thank you, Miriam and Olivia. You were both just so phenomenal.
Yes.
And Sonia.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.